Okay, so for part D, the question is asking, use your knowledge of osmosis to explain the results. Okay, so the 0 and 0.1% solution had a high water potential than inside the potato cells. So water moved in by osmosis and made these cells increase in mass. The 0.2% solution had a water potential equal to that of the potato cells, so there was no net movement of water into and out of the cells. Because if you see over here, this was 4.9 gram, this was also 4.9 gram, so it's the same, meaning there was no difference in the gradient. The gradient remained the same actually. So the solutions with higher concentrations than this had water potentials lower than that of the potato cells, so water moved out of these cells by osmosis and their mass therefore decreased. So basically, when there's a higher water potential, when the solution had a high water potential than inside the potato cells, so the water, they moved inside, the water moved in. So when the water moved inside the potato cells, it made the cells increase in mass, meaning they grew thicker. But when the concentration is the same both inside the cell, outside the cell, so there is no net movement, so the concentration of the water remains the same. Whereas for the solution where the cells, where the potato cells had a higher concentration than outside, like where the potato cells had a higher concentration than the surrounding, so the water moved out of the potato cells, so it caused the potato to decrease in mass. So in simple words, when the potato has like a large volume of water inside it, so it will actually move out to balance out the gradient, to maintain, so that's evenly, the water molecules are evenly spread out. But when the concentration is the same, there's no net movement, so the mass remains the same, there is no change. But when the concentration of the water is higher outside than the cell inside, so the water will move in the cell, so it will make the cell increase in mass, so the potato will become thicker, it will gain mass. So basically they want you to explain the results that's going on. So actually, if you can understand this whole thing, you can just deduce that since like basically they don't want to explain each and every piece. They want you to explain general thing, what happens when there's a higher water potential outside the cell, what happens when there's high water potential inside the cell, and what happens when it remains the same. So you just have to explain general thing. Now, suggest how the student could have changed this method to make his results more reliable. So have several pieces of potato in each solution and calculate a mean change in mass for each. So as you can see over here, there was only one piece, like piece A, and each piece was just one for each category. What the question wants is how you could make the experiment more reliable. That means for each category, for example, if it's distilled water, so there should be at least 5 pieces, then calculate the mean. 0.1% sugar solution, there should be 5 pieces of piece B, calculate the mean. For 0.2% solution, instead of 1 piece, there should be 5 pieces, just like that. So there could have several pieces of potato in each solution and then calculate mean change in mass for each. You know, if the question asks how to make it more reliable, you say though that one point that you have to include is mean change, like calculate the mean. How? By having several items, several pieces, several volumes, like that. Yeah. Now for part F, the student's teacher suggested that it would have been better if he had calculated the percentage change in mass of each piece of potato rather than just the change in mass. Do you agree? So basically the question asking like which one is better, to calculate the percentage change in mass or to just calculate change in mass. So it's actually better to calculate percentage change in mass rather than just change in mass, because the original masses of the potato pieces were not identical. Calculating percentage change would give a fairer comparison, thus it will make the mean change more reliable between the pieces. It would avoid discrepancies caused by this uncontrolled variable. So basically, if they ask you which one is more better, percentage change or just change in mass, so you have to say it's percentage change in mass, because originally in the question they give you all in percentage. It's all the concentration is all in percentage, whereas change in mass, it's like change in mass is like all. Actually, if you think logically, like why they want you to use change, why they want you to use like percentage instead of just normal numerical figure. Well, it's actually more accurate when you use percentages, because percentage, when you calculate by percentage, you have like 2 decimal answer, 3 decimal answer, so it's like more accurate than just using change in mass, because you're actually calculating over 100 rather than just like between, like for example 5.5 minus 5.2. But if you do it like, you could say 5.5 minus 5.2 times 100 divided by 5.2, that would be more accurate than just doing 5.5 minus 5.2. If you guys don't understand, and explain it over here. Like normally percentage change in mass, example, if you take for piece A, so percentage, this is actually a formula, difference times 100 divided by difference times 100 divided by initial. So this is actually the formula. So if you apply this formula, the difference means 5.5 minus 5.2 times 100, that gives you a 5.5 minus 5.2 times 100, that gives you a 30. And now with that same answer, 30 divided by the initial, which is 5.2, so your answer is going to be 5.769. so if you just round it up, it's literally 5.8. So this is actually more accurate because 5.8 percentage. So this is like the percentage change. But if you just use normal, which is, this is like the normal one, just using 5.5 minus 5.2, which gives you a 0.3 grams. So if they ask you which one is better, so what you have to remember is percentage in mass is a much more better comparison than just using normal one, right? Yeah, so it's like it's a better way to explain. This is not important, this is also not necessary. So now the last exercise 3.4, diffusion and active transport. This is quite a tough exercise, but if you're hoping for grade A or B, you should be able to cope with it. It tests your ability to analyze data and then use your knowledge to draw conclusions, also to make predictions. The table shows the concentration of 3 different ions inside the cells in a plant root and in the water in the soil. Basically, concentration of 3 different ions in the cell and surrounding the cell. So ion A, concentration plant roots 0.5, concentration 0.5, same. Ion B, 1 in the plant cell, 0.4 outside, means less outside. Ion C 0.6 and ion C in the soil water 0.8, so outside is 0.8. which ion has moved into the root hair by diffusion. Moving in meaning which ion has moved into the root hair by diffusion. So it's going to be ion A, because the concentration is the same inside outside, because they're asking about diffusion. Ions are always related to the active transport, so it's going to remain the same. Diffusion has nothing to do with ions actually. Yeah. And then for part B, which ion has been moved into the root hair by active transport? Ion B, because the concentration inside the root cell is greater than outside, so it must have moved in against its concentration gradient. Always remember, when it's active transport, don't ever confuse, like it should be that from a concentration of higher to lower, but no, for active transport it moves from low to high, so it's going to be ion B. You see, from low to high, because the concentration inside the root cell is greater than the outside. You see, in the plant root cell it's 1.8, but outside 0.4, so it's going to be ion B. Now part C, which ion has been moved out of the root hair by active transport? Ion C. Why? Because the concentration outside the cell is greater than the inside, so it must have been moved out against its concentration gradient. Initially, when you will read the question, you'll just go blank, like what the heck is this, like I don't know what's going on. Always remember, active transport is from low to high, meaning from here to here, and for ion C it moves from here to here. So if you see, concentration plant root cells inside the cell is 0.6, outside the cell is 0.8. Question is asking moving out, so it will move from low to high, so obviously it's going to be ion C. If you see ion B, inside is 1, outside 0.4, so what will move inside is going to be ion B. This is how active transport is actually very confusing. It's really literally very confusing if you compare with diffusion and osmosis actually. But if you understand it this way, if you understand the thing that active transport goes from low to high against a concentration gradient, then you can actually answer this question, and which is the correct one. Now, last part, if the soil in which plant is growing becomes waterlogged, the roots can no longer get sufficient oxygen. Suggest how this would affect the concentration of ions A, B, and C in root cells. Explain each of your suggestions. The roots would not be able to respire, so they would not be able to release energy to use in active transport. This would have no effect on the concentration of A, as these ions are moving passively by diffusion. Active transport B and C would stop, so they would now move by diffusion alone, and their concentration in the soil and cells would become equal. For ion B, this would mean that the concentration inside the cells would decrease, and for ion C, it would increase. There would probably be no measurable effect in the soil water, because this is a huge volume compared with that of the root cells. Basically, that one ideology that you need to remember of active transport is it uses energy from respiration. Respiration involves the usage of oxygen and glucose. Okay, so when the plant becomes waterlogged, meaning there's not enough oxygen, so respiration cannot take place. If respiration cannot take place, energy cannot happen. If energy cannot be produced, active transport cannot take place. So active transport cannot take place, meaning ion B and C is going to be affected. Ion A, there will be no change on ion A, because it's not related to active transport, it's just related with diffusion. Diffusion doesn't use energy, so there will be no effect on ion A. But for ion B and C, they use active transport, so if the root becomes waterlogged, meaning there's no space for oxygen to go to actually be utilized, so the active transport actually stop, because you need energy not produced because no oxygen. So obviously ion B and C is going to be affected. So how they'll be affected? iron B, the concentration inside the cells would decrease. So the concentration of iron B inside the cell would decrease. So if you see over here, for active transport, it moves from a region of low concentration to a high concentration. But when active transport will stop, this ion will actually opt for the simple process, which is diffusion. Naturally, there is no option of choosing, it just naturally happens. It will opt for the diffusion. So in diffusion, it moves from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. So the concentration in the concentration in the root cells, it will actually decrease because they want to even out. Same thing will go for iron C. The concentration of the soil water will move into the root cells to balance it out. So basically what happens in active transport is opposite for diffusion. Active transport meaning it will go from out to in for iron B. For iron C, it will go from in to out. But for diffusion, it's going to be from in to out, and for iron C, it's going to be from out to in. So when it's like from out to in, meaning the concentration will increase, but if it's from in to out, the concentration in the root cell will decrease. Since the entire question is related with the root hair cells, so you just explain in relation to the root hair cells. So that's quite easy to understand. You just need to read the question twice, make sure you fully understand this active transport concept and everything. This question is really hard actually, because if you see it once, you just go blank. But I tell you, they won't ask that level of difficulty in your paper 4, because following the new format of the 2020 papers, it's not that hard compared to the previous years. And yeah, so this is the one thing you can take note of. So that's all, we're done with this topic. If you guys think I've made any mistake, so you can let me know in the comments. If I deem it necessary, I'll pin your comment and I'll inform other viewers as well. And till then, I hope you guys stay safe, and I hope you guys can do good. And I'll see you guys in our next video. Bye.